Hi, everybody. Once again, I'm Abba Shapiro, and what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to take about 20 to 30 minutes to walk through Luminar with libraries to talk about the application. This is what Luminar with libraries looks like when you don't have any folders added to it. This is just the application. I created a brand new catalog for this session. And there are several ways that you can use Luminar to organize and to develop your photos. And that's what it is. Luminar 3 is a great organizer. You can rate, and then once you have sorted out your images, you can then take them into the edit side and process the images. So let me show you a couple of ways that I can attach images to this library. And if you look at the right side of the interface, you'll see there's a panel. And right now it says Shortcut Albums and Folders. And if I click on the little plus sign, this will allow me to point to a folder full of images. And when I point to a folder full of images, it loads very quickly and allows me to organize them. So let's go ahead and I will open up a few different images. As a matter of fact, I have one called Travel Photos that I think is going to be a good choice. And so if I click on any of these, I'll click on this one, Paris, and I will add this folder to Luminar, and it immediately loads all the pictures that are in that folder. It doesn't move them. If they're a raw image, it will read the JPEG out of the raw image. Of course, if they're JPEGs, it will read them, and then quickly creates a thumbnail. But everything's left in place, so you're not really moving your images around. So it's a nice way to be able to quickly be able to sort through. It's great if you just bring in a camera card and you want to take a look at what's on it. You don't have to go through all that pain and weight of importing. So as you can see, these came in very quickly. And I look over here on the right and I can see it was 103 images. But I can add other folders to this. I can just hit the plus sign again. I could select multiple ones. So maybe I'll select Travel Landscape, South Beach, and Shanghai, and add these folders. And as you can see now, these subfolders are added to this section. And even under travel and landscape, one thing you might notice here, I'm going to jump back to, there's a little triangle here. There was actually two folders inside of that. So when you point to a folder, if you've already organized your photographs, maybe you've organized them by event or by date, and they're in subfolders, Luminar will actually respect that organization. So you don't have to worry that, oh, I have to dig through 1,000 images because they're all put into one big pile. So once you have attached these images to your catalog, you can easily sort through them. You can look at these in 4 different sizes. If you look at the very top of the interface, depending on how many images you have and the size of your screen, you may want to use smaller images so you can see more of them simultaneously, or you can go ahead and step through the different sizes all the way up to large, and that way it's very easy to see what's here. I do want to point out one of the really nice things about the Luminar program is that the interface is very attractive. We don't waste a lot of space. In other words, you don't have black bars on top or bottom. It tries to organize the photos and use all of the real estate so it's aesthetically pleasing as you're looking at your images. And it's also very easy to favorite and tag your images. So if I have this folder of images and I wanted to rate them, and I'm going to just scroll right to the top, I can go through. And if I click on one of these images, the first one I'll click on, I can right click and I can choose to set a flag if this is a favorite or a rejected. And we use the common keyboard shortcuts. Favorite is a pick. Rejected is just an X marks the spot. But in addition to that, I can also give it a rating of 1 to 5 stars. So it's a great way to organize things, as well as I can give it a color label. Now, all of these have keyboard shortcuts, so you can right-click on it to rate it, but I tend to like to just click on the image, and if I want to rate it with a number, it's 1 through 5. So if you notice, I just gave this a 3. You see 3 stars. This one I like a little better. I'll give 4 stars, 3 stars. This is maybe a 2. Really like that. I can change that. And I'm just typing on the keyboard now, and I can very quickly go through and rate all my images. As a matter of fact, I can go back and forth between images with just the left and right arrow keys. So depending on how I want to organize things, I could go through and say P for picks, X for rejects, and very quickly go through all of my images. And once I've done some of this sorting, maybe I'll go ahead and I'll call a couple of these picks. And you can see if I hit the P key or if I hover over the right side, there's a little heart. If I reject something, maybe I'll go down here and reject this image of Washington, D.C. I'll hit the X key, and you see there's a little X here. And where this becomes really valuable is that if you look in the upper right-hand corner, I have a couple of ways that I can organize and sort my images. So right now I'm showing all of my images, but I can choose to look at just the ones that I made a pick, or just my favorites, or anything that's 3 or more stars, or if I've given them any kind of a color rating. And you'll notice later on that once I start editing images, I can easily look at just the images I've edited. Because one of the things that happens a lot is we work in these large catalogs, and it's like, well, where was the picture I was working on? And you got to remember where it is and scroll through it. Here I can just look at what's edited, and there's nothing edited yet. And I can quickly find what I most recently worked on. And I think that's a really nice feature. In addition, over to the right, I can choose not only what images I'm choosing to look at, but how I'm going to organize them. If I'm going to organize them by, their rating from 1 to 5, or basically by their file type, or edit time or capture time. Usually we do capture time, so it's in chronological order to start with, but then, it's easy to change this. So that's an idea of basic organization. So I could go here and say, I just want to see anything that's 3 or more stars. And as you can see, I can just find those images. So that's, in a very broad way, one of the ways that you can organize your images. And I want to talk a little bit about the workflow in editing, and we'll come back a little bit later to look at some other images and how we can process them. I'm going to go ahead and open up this folder from Shanghai just to give you an idea of what Luminar can do with an image. And so I'm going to pick, these are kind of, not great to start with. They're kind of a little bit low contrast. If I click on that, I see this image has potential, but I want to do some processing. And the whole idea behind Luminar is that it can be as easy to use as you want it to be, with simple looks that I'll explain in a moment, or really high end, where you'd have the equivalent of some of the filters you might find in Photoshop, where you have curves and hue, saturation, and luminance types of images, types of filters. So if you look over to the right side, and there is a switch here to go from the library where we were organizing the images to edit, and when I switch over to edit, I now can start working on these images. Let me close this left side just so it's a little bit less distracting. I don't want the film strip there. So right now I have a couple of ways that I can attack this image. One of them is to use looks, and Luminar looks are presets, and it comes bundled with about 7 or 8 looks, and then we have a whole bunch more that we have as free downloads from our site. We also have some additional looks that have been provided by some professional photographers that they do sell. But there's quite a bit of options here. So I'm going to switch over to the Essential Luminar Look Collection. And you'll notice when I click on that the images across the bottom will change, and so will the descriptors. So what happens here is I have a variety of looks, and I can see a thumbnail of what the image will look like once I apply this look. So I'm going to click on AI Image Enhancer. And you'll notice that when I click on this, over to the right side, the list of filters that create this look will change, and their sliders will adjust. So I'm going to go ahead and click on AI Image Enhancer. And it already makes the image pop a little bit better. And what it put on this photo were these 4 filters on the far right. And it already made some adjustments. If I go ahead and click on, say, a different one, such as Contrast Enhancer, it has a different effect on the image. And you can see that in this case, I'm just using a develop module and clarity, and the other two, which I'm going to explain shortly, the AI Sky Enhancer and Accent AI filter, are not there, and those are 2 of our artificial intelligence filters that help you edit faster. So there's haze removal, there's sky enhancer, there's a whole variety, but the point that I'm making is that each one of these sets up a different grouping of filters. I'm going to go all the way back to the very first one, AI Image Enhance. Now, what's important to note here is that with any of these Luminar looks, you can, if they're too strong, blend them back with the original. So you can really control basically the opacity of this correction to the bottom image. And in addition to be able to globally change the entire look, all of the sliders for the filters on the right side are also live. So if I like this image, but I think, you know what, I think it's a little bit too blue, I could either go here with the eyedropper and try to select something that should be neutral white to white balance this image. I think it went a little bit extreme here, but you can see very easily I can readjust this slider so that I can control the amount of blue in this image or the amount of gold in the sunset. So all of my sliders are live, and I can go ahead and tweak this image to enhance it the way I like it. And I think it's pretty good to start with. I do want to explain these two filters down here on the bottom, and we're going to explore these more as the webinar goes on. But one is our Accent AI filter, and the other is our AI Sky Enhancer. Now, what these are is that we've analyzed tens of thousands of images, probably about 80,000 images, where we had the before and then we had the after, which were processed by photographers. And we compared what the photographer did to that image, and using machine learning, we figured out, okay, how we can recognize things such as buildings or mountains and sky and people. So when you move that one Accent AI slider from the left to the right, you're really under the hood moving about 12 different controls that deal with contrast, your shadows, your highlights, your whites and blacks, all the tonality of the image, color and contrast. And so it's kind of a smart slider. It's not just a quick fix. And the AI Sky Enhancer is very similar to that. And in this case, it recognizes what is sky and what is not, and what are clouds, and it knows how to enhance the color, as well as not to make it too crunchy, because sky should never be crunchy, and creates a mask automatically so it only affects the sky. And what's nice about this is that it will recognize skies from blue hour to blue hour. That's the hour. That's the time before sunrise all the way till the time after sunset. And let me just show you what happens when I move these individual sliders. With the Accent AI filter, you can see, had I not used it or had it not been automatically used, it actually brings out some of the shadows in the foreground without blowing out any of the other information. And if I move the AI Sky Enhancer to the left, this is what it would be without it. And as I move it to the right, you can see it is intensifying the sunset effect. So very easily and very quickly, I'm able to take an image that before looked like this. I'm going to click on the little eyeball, and I can pop it a little bit to where I'm getting the look that I want. Now, the nice thing about this is I don't have to stop with just these 4 filters. This can be a starting point. If I like my image, it's good to go. I can easily export it. But if I wanted to, I could add one of over 50 other filters to this workflow here. So perhaps maybe I want to add a little bit of sharpness or structure to this image. So I'm going to click on Structure. And if I move the slider to the right, the whole image gets sharper. You can see the buildings really start to pop. But the downside is that my clouds are starting to get a little bit crunchy. And this allows me to point out that one of the nice features in Luminar is that each of these filters, as well as the entire layer, has the ability to create a mask. So if I only want to apply this sharpness to part of my image, I can do that very easily. I'm going to click on this little button to the right of the word structure, and I can choose to use a brush, or I could do a radial mask or a gradient mask to separate what is applied to the image and what is not. In this case, I think a brush is appropriate because the buildings are all different sizes. So all I need to do is start painting, and you'll notice that the sharpness only exists underneath my brush. So I don't have to worry about the sky here. So I'm just going over there. I'm not going to do the water. Don't want the water real crunchy, but I really like having, the buildings nice and sharp. And I'm just painting over it. And if I wanted to see how accurate I was in my painting, and I don't think I need to be that accurate, I could go into the upper left-hand corner of the interface, and next to the word mask, there's a little eyeball, and that turns on the rubylith that shows me where the mask is being applied. So I can go ahead and paint that if I want. If I think I've overshot, maybe this water here, I could switch from a paintbrush to an erase brush and just go over here and paint a nice straight line just to make sure that I don't sharpen my water. So there we go. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. And if I wanted to, I can toggle off any one of these filters to see what it looks like without that filter. Or maybe I just, I like to keep it in my back pocket, but I don't want to delete it. So you can see that if I hit this little eyeball here, it should toggle the sharpness off and on. And it's only happening on those buildings. So I may pump that up just a little bit. So I kind of like where this is going, and I would be pretty happy with putting this image out there, but there's a slew of other filters I could apply. Now, the nice thing is this is all automatically saved. So if I jumped back into my library and I go up here and look at the entire gallery, I can see the processed image, and that's great. So I don't have to worry about looking for it. If I wanted to just see what I've edited, as I indicated earlier, I could just look at my edited images. There it is. And let's go back to all of our images. Another nice feature is, these other areas are very similar. These are actually bracketed shots, but if I wanted to, I can go ahead and copy. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to go to adjustments, and I can copy any adjustments, which were all those filters, and I could paste them onto another image, and you can see it will go ahead and process it, and I've gotten a lot of that dynamic area done right here. And if I wanted to, I could double click that, and when I load that into the edit panel, I have all of those same sliders to work with, and I can modify it based upon the individual images. So it did a real nice job in processing it the way that I wanted to. But let me go back and jump to my library and process a different type of image using some of our other filters. So let's go ahead and open this up. And I want to just quickly scroll through. Maybe I'll go to something from, I'll open up some more travel photos. Let's see, miscellaneous to organize. I might have some nice images in there. Oh, it's a completely empty folder. I must have moved that around. So miscellaneous to organize is not very organized. No, yeah, it had a couple things, but I emptied that out. Oh, it's quick edit these. That's what I wanted to open. So I'll add that folder. There we go. A variety of images here, some beach shots. We have a wonderful tiger shot. That's your shot, isn't it, Laurie, I believe? So these are some images that, again, could use some processing. I have both people and landscapes as well as buildings. And I wanted to show you, I'm going to open up this shot here to the far right. This is just a shot taken in Savannah, Georgia. And, again, skies are a little bit meh. It's midday. They were pretty bright. But I can go ahead and I'm going to switch to the edit mode. And one of the things that we have in addition to our looks is we also have workspaces. And the way a workspace is different than a look is if I apply a workspace, such as this quick and awesome workspace, it brings in the individual filters that have been designated for that workspace. And you'll see there's ones for aerial photography, if you're doing black and white imagery or landscapes or portrait. It brings in different filters, but none of them are adjusted. So what it is a time saver so that you don't have to drag in the same filters over and over again when you want to quickly process an image. So I added the quick and awesome, and just take a look at what happens when I grab that accent AI filter and move it to the right. You can see the image starts to really pop. There's a lot of contrast there. It's as if I've done an S-curve on my curves panel. It's really starting to come a little bit more alive. And maybe I pushed it a little bit too much, so I'll just draw that back. And then I'm going to work on the AI sky enhancer. And you notice that it's bringing out a lot of the nuance and a lot of the blue in the sky. But unlike a polarizer, it's not really causing the clouds to turn blue or affecting the clouds in a negative way. Can take a little bit of saturation and vibrance just to make the ship pop a little bit. Probably brought my saturation down a little bit too much. I like to mix saturation and vibrance. Saturation is pretty much like painting with a broom. When I make something more saturated in any program, if it's already saturated, it gets super saturated, and vice versa if I move it to the left. Vibrance, I consider smart saturation. So in the case of moving this to the right, it only saturates the less saturated areas and does not saturate the greater saturated areas. So it kind of evens things out. And the same thing if I move it to the left, it just brings down the higher saturated colors and leaves the more muted colors alone. So by bringing down the saturation to the left and the vibrance to the right, it kind of evens out and balances my color. It's very subtle. If I turned it off, you would do just like a hair of difference, but I think it does affect some of these cargo containers. And then I can add a little bit of clarity. So again, what I've done is very quickly just moved a couple of sliders, but these are smart sliders and they've done a lot more work than going ahead and opening up a develop filter and working with highlights and shadows and contrast. It does all that work for you. I'm going to go ahead and do a side-by-side comparison. If I click this little button up here, I can actually get a slider and see really what I've done. And this is, subtle. I'm not really trying to push that HDR look. I just wanted a picture that pops a little bit, and I can turn that off. And I can go ahead if I wanted to complement this, add some other filters. And maybe it's something as simple as, I don't like the color tone of the water here. So I could go down, and there's many ways to attack something like this. I could put in an adjustable gradient. And if I put an adjustable gradient, I can set that orientation. I'll put it right at the water line. And I can change my threshold. And I can even rotate it a little bit if I wanted to kind of go along with the coast. I'm very good at rotating with my mouse here. There we go. And now once I've done this, I can go ahead and on the bottom, I can say, you know what? I want to cool that water down a little bit. Okay, and it doesn't affect anything else. It's just affecting that little line there. Maybe I want to bring up the vibrance, bring down the vibrance. So I can very easily focus what I want that water to do, as well as I could go ahead and affect the top. But I don't think maybe I'll, if I want to give it a little golden hour, but it just shows you the control. I think I'll leave that alone. So this is really nice. It's very subtle, but I can, tweak that water just so it's a little more aesthetically pleasing. Another thing that you can do with Luminar is, let's say I got this to an image that it's neutral. This is nice. There's no special effects here. It's not stylized at all. It's just crisp. I can add additional adjustment layers in Luminar by simply clicking that plus button in the upper right-hand corner, and I can create a new adjustment layer. And this allows me to apply additional filters. And we have our filters grouped in, the essential things you need to fix something. And, we have a regular develop filter with all, if I put this on just to show you what it is, it's what you expect for a raw develop. It controls exposure and contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, blacks, clarities, etc. But I want to do something a little more creative. And you can see we have an entire section of filters that are devoted to creativity. So I can try these as individual filters on my adjustment layer without affecting that first layer. So maybe I'll try the Orton effect, and this kind of is a neat little filter. It makes things kind of sharp and glowy at the same time. Great for portraits. It's an interesting stylized look. If I add a filter that I don't like, I can easily just hit the X and remove it. So there's a lot of things. I could go here and try to turn on a little bit of golden hour. That can control, maybe it's a little more of the sunset. I can control that. And there's some, nice little filters. I wouldn't necessarily use this one because I think the sun's coming from a different place, but I can use this sun rays filter. And what's nice about it is that it actually looks at the contrast of what's around it and gives that natural feel. Now this is, without any slider modification. So I positioned it maybe coming over the building, and let me turn off placing the center. And I can control here the radius and maybe warm this up a little bit. And we'll look at maybe warm up our light rays and randomize them a little bit just to see how it looks. And so I can get just to the point where I see where it's coming through. And then if I wanted to, I can even say, you know what, I don't want it over here. And that's where the joy of those masks come into play. I'm going to click on brush like I did before with the sharpening. And now instead of painting, I'm going to erase what I don't want in this filter. And I'm going to have the sun just come, not anywhere in the upper part, but just really kind of effect coming across the building. So this is the after and this is the before. And I could dial that down if I wanted to a little bit, but it's just one of those nice little features that you have that you can go ahead and play with additional filters without having to worry about affecting your original developing. So that's one of the nice things that you can do. The other thing that we have, and I'm going to just drop around to some different images just to keep it lively. I can easily stylize an image with my looks. So we'll open up this image and, this is actually pretty good on its own. Maybe I'll click on AI Image Enhancer. That really pops the color. Maybe I'll pull down some of that saturation just a little bit. I do like the idea of it popping it. It's kind of fairyland. But now, once I've done that, I can add yet an adjustment layer on this image. And instead of working with a bunch of individual filters and bring them in, I can go ahead and try some of these other looks. So maybe I want to try this soft and airy, and it will lay those filters on top, and I can get this kind of like this ethereal look. And I dialed it back a little bit because I think that was a little bit too much. And if I wanted to, I could even go in and work with some of the individual elements. The nice thing is if that doesn't do it for me, I can go in and I have a variety of looks to choose from. So maybe I want to go into landscapes. And in this case, I have a bunch of different options. And I want to maybe apply warm sunset to see how that would work, or mystic land. So I can stylistically just play with different things until I get something that I like or something close to what I like. And then if I wanted to, I can play with these sliders here. Maybe I really like this, but I want to pull out the saturation just a little bit to bring it down to reality. But you know, this was my before, which was a nice image, but this is much more stylized and very easy to do. So once you've played with your images, once you've developed them where you wanted to, um, you know, you need to export them to show them off to your friends, to post them to your websites, to show them to your clients. You can do that very easily with an image selected in the edit mode, or you can go into the library mode and select multiple images. But all you have to do is, with the image selected, go to the upper right-hand area, go export image, and you would get choices on how you want to export this as a JPEG or as a TIFF file, and as well as, you know, PDF files and Photoshop files. And depending on what you choose, you'll have some different choices. So with JPEG, you can choose quality. With a TIFF file, you can choose whether you want it to be 8-bit or 16-bit color, and also how the compression would work, as well as pixels per inch. So if you need to send it off to a printer. And then, of course, each of these other ones would give you additional choices. And if you choose to, you can also change the size of the image that you're exporting. So you can leave it the original size, or maybe you want to just put out a bunch of sample images at 2,000 pixels wide, and you can very easily set that on your export. I'm going to cancel for a moment because I want to show you some of the other options you have when working with images and exporting them. You saw I could export it as a physical image that I could then post, but I can also have it automatically create an image that would go into my mail browser, or I could message, or in some cases, depending on Mac and PC, you'll get some different options to some social media sites. So if I have a SmugMug account, I could actually enter my information and load it directly there. As well as I do have the option of opening this up in other applications. So if you're used to working with Lightroom or Photoshop, I can, once I start processing, send it to one of those applications. It will launch that application and I can work directly inside. And I do want to point out that when you install Luminar 3, it also installs a set of plugins, or you can choose to have it install a set of plugins into into Adobe Photoshop or Adobe Lightroom, and also Adobe Photoshop Elements. And if you're working on a Mac, you can do it on Apple Aperture, as well as it integrates with the workflow in Apple Photos. So you could start in one of these applications and just use Luminar as a plugin to take advantage of some of maybe our artificial intelligence filters to really goose up one of your images. So that's one of the general ideas on kind of the workflow.
I have a question. It might be too simplified, but is the Alt-Z or the Command-Z work easily in this application?
I think that's actually a great question because I didn't cover that. And so, yes, I want to talk about undos, and let me actually show you how cool it is. I'm going to jump back to edited. So these are the two images that I worked on. And so I can go back at any point in time, and it remembers every single filter I applied, every single slider I adjusted, all my masking. So not only can I undo with Command-Z or Control-Z, depending on your system, but you'll notice that there is a little drop down at the very upper right that says History. And I can actually scroll down and see everything I've done and jump back to any point in time. And I can say, oh yeah, this is where I messed up and turned everybody blue. And I could jump back to that point and start editing from that point on, or see exactly how I created something. So it's a very nice feature. And even when you close the application and reopen it, this history is remembered as long as you have that image loaded into the catalog. And you can have multiple catalogs. So you might have one for work or family or for different clients, depending on how you want to roll. They don't all have to be in one specific catalog. So I'm going to hand it back to Lori because she's going to kind of help point you in the direction of if you want to find out more about the application and also more about some of your learning opportunities.
Great, thanks, Abba. So hopefully you can see my screen. I'm on the Skylum website, and I want to show you where you can find more information. There was a question about keyboard shortcuts, and we do have a list of those. So I'll show you where you can find things like that. Lots of videos. Abba does a ton of videos, great videos that you can access once you get home or at your convenience. You can watch these. So at the Skylum website, if you go under Luminar, you'll see that we've got a lot of information here. Underneath education, this is where we spend most of our time, is in the education section here. And as you can see, Abba we just posted one. I think it was today, Abba. He does quick tips. Every week, there are short tips that are really informative. Robert Benelli is also on our team, and he also creates some really nice things that you can learn about Luminar. So there's tons of information if you just go in the education section. Plus, we do record all of our live webinars, not necessarily the user group, but the live webinars that we do probably once or twice a week. So you'll see a lot of that information there as well. Now, going underneath, again, under Luminar, here's the user guide. And everything you ever wanted to know about Luminar and more about Luminar is in this user guide. So some of those nice filters that Abba had showed you earlier, you can go in and take a look and actually see exactly what they do. So if I go into the essential section here, he was talking about the Accent AI filter. It talks about how that works. Here's the AI Sky Enhancer. There's some tips along the way, so you might want to just kind of scroll through and take a look at some of those. Now, at the end of our user guide, this is where we have our keyboard shortcuts. There's keyboard shortcuts for Windows, and there's also for Mac. And so you can either print this out or memorize it, whatever you want to do. But a lot of our keyboard shortcuts actually match, like for instance, Adobe Photoshop's keyboard shortcuts. So you'll be able to use those here. Okay. Lastly, I do want to show you where our video gallery is. We have all of our videos posted up in this section here, and they're really divvied out depending on whether it's problem solving or you want some inspirational type videos. You can just click on that, but there's a ton of videos in here, including how to install it. So we hope that you'll take some time to look at that. So Abba, I'll let you go ahead and close that out. Thanks everyone for watching.
Well, thanks everyone. I really appreciate you joining us. Enjoy the rest of your evening at your meetup.